I think one of the things that I want the entire team to understand is most of us will never have our own law firm, especially us non-lawyers. We won't ever have our name on a marquee. The mentality has to be that everyone that walks down this hallway feels like their name is on the door. You have to kind of feel like you're part ownership here.
Bo Royal here, co-founder and CEO of Pareto Legal, a marketing agency that helps injury lawyers increase their profits with digital strategy, online advertising, and analytics. You're listening to the Pareto Legal Podcast, where we feature world-class attorneys, entrepreneurs, and legal experts. And today I am joined by TJ Saye, COO at Salvi, Schostok, and Pritchard, a Chicago-based law firm that focuses on medical malpractice and personal injury cases. In this episode, we'll learn about TJ's background, his role as COO of an 8-figure 20-attorney firm, and how he effectively manages the firm's operations, administration, and marketing activities. TJ, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
TJ, to get right into it, can we talk about your career journey and what led you to become COO at Salvi, Schostok, and Pritchard?
It's a great place to start, it has been a very long journey to get to this spot. I didn't grow up dreaming about being a lawyer, and most of my lawyer friends dreamt about being a lawyer very early on, and I sure didn't dream about being the COO of a law firm. So this journey has taken me to a place that I never expected I would be. And as I mentioned to you a little earlier, it's very rare for me to be in front of a camera. I do all of my work behind the camera, and I think all good COOs understand that role. It's not my job to be in front of people, it's the lawyer's job. So I hope I don't disappoint. So my journey really started, I was working for a nonprofit organization that brought me from Wisconsin down to Illinois. And it was really my first true professional job. And while I was working for that nonprofit, not making a lot of money, as you can imagine, I bet you I was making somewhere around $20,000 a year, an opportunity arose to work for another nonprofit. And this time it was going to be specifically volunteer. And so as a young guy trying to network in a new city, I thought that would be a really good opportunity. So I took this volunteer role, and I worked on a special event to raise money to purchase a van for disabled individuals to get back and forth from Park District programming. And so I worked very diligently on this fundraising event, and I helped produce a video for the event, and it really impressed at the time a lot of people, and it kind of got my name on the radar screen in kind of the local nonprofit community. And a few months later, Pat Salvi, who is the managing equity partner of this law firm, was at a workout facility, and he was just having casual conversation with a woman who actually attended that nonprofit event. And he said, do you know of any young, enthusiastic people that might be interested in public relations or marketing? I own a small law firm up in Waukegan, Illinois, and I'm looking for someone that can help with public relations. And he said, I have an idea. I've seen some large law firms hire marketing people, and I think this would be perfect for the plaintiff's environment. And that's kind of how the journey began. About a month later, I was interviewing with Pat Salvi, and scared crapless, as you can imagine. And slowly but surely, I think did a pretty good interview. And he said, I can't pay you much. This is, those are the famous last words that you hate to hear. And he says, but if you work for me and I'll help mentor you, you won't have to worry about money, and you won't have to worry about your professional career. We'll do something special together. And that motivated me. Now, at the time, this is in, the mid 90s, late 90s, there weren't full-time marketing professionals in plaintiff firms anywhere. I've made this comment before over the years, and some people will raise their eyes and say, well, you weren't the first, but I have yet to find someone who was in a similar circumstance. And I joined pretty quickly the Legal Marketing Association's local and national chapters. And I think in that first 3-4 years, I never met someone that worked in a plaintiff's firm as a full-time marketing person. Most of the time, plaintiff's firms back in those days would just have a secretary or a paralegal or even a junior associate do marketing activities for law firms. And the reason I bring this up is not to brag by any means, because all the failures that I went through trying to learn how to be a marketing person for a law firm. But it was the thing I want to really push forward is you had to do it all on your own, especially at those days. There wasn't a lot of money available. So, start with business cards. We didn't have business cards. So you had to design them, and you had to learn Cork Express to do that. And so the work that went into just designing the cards, designing the newsletters, learning how to mail all these things, designing advertisements for the yellow pages, which was the primary way you generated business back in those days, how to write a press release that would actually sell the firm and get on the news, which is how you made the phone ring. And so there weren't mentors to do this at that point. There were some in very large firms, but not in the smaller firm environments. So when I say I started from scratch, learning how that very first piece of running a law firm, the marketing aspect, would not be an overstatement. So that's kind of how my journey began. And then, as you've probably seen, I left the firm and I went to Sidley and then learned a completely different set of marketing skill set in another large law firm. Where I learned a completely different skill set and started learning more about management and budgeting, and then came back to this firm about 20 years ago when the managing partner said, my son's going to be getting out of law school soon, and I want to surround him with people we trust and know and that we know work hard. And I said, Pat, I don't have the skill set, the financial background, and I surely don't have the human resources background for management to be a COO. And he said, like with marketing, you'll learn how to do these things, and I'll be patient with you as you learn how to be a COO. And it was risky because I had other offers for more money and more and at the time better opportunity. But I took him for his word again, came back to the firm, and I guess the rest is history. And that's where I am today.
The firm, when you took that first marketing job with them?
We had a small office in Waukegan. It was a new office, but small as in size. I want to say there were 4 full-time, maybe 5 lawyers at that time, and then just a handful of support staff. So it was very tiny. They had some satellite cases in Chicago and Cook County, but it was primarily known, I think it's fair to say, as a Lake County law firm.
And how big is the firm now, 25 years later?
Yeah, we now today have over 20 lawyers. That number is fluctuating a little bit, but I think we're at about 22, 23. I do have offers out to 3 lawyers that will be starting in the fall that have accepted. And then we have over 50 support staff, and that does not include some remote workers and seasonal workers that we also bring in. So the operation has grown quite substantially over the years, and it has really. I thought at this point in my career, as I approach my early mid-50s, I'd be slowing down dramatically, and that has definitely not happened. It has picked up pretty dramatically, and I really do think we're just getting started. We're just getting started on our journey as a law firm. We are very young. In general terms, a lot of the people that are running the firm or have positions of authority are very young professionals, and so I'm really excited about this next group of people that are coming in that will take us to the next level. And as all good leaders need to do, I'm constantly looking for my replacement. I'm constantly looking for who's the next person that will get an opportunity to be great and take some of my ideas and thoughts and the firm's thoughts and ideas and take it to the next level. But I do kind of think we're just getting started on this journey.
So going from 20, 25 years ago, just a 4-attorney practice to now 20 plus attorneys, 50 plus, support staff members. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced over the course of that time, and how did you address them?
I just want to say one last thing about that before we get to that question. It's not just this, and I think anyone that runs a law firm or manages a law firm will understand this pretty clearly. It's not just growth. You have to, in order to have that kind of growth, you have to be able to be pretty fluid in growing the size of your firm. When I'm talking about square footage. So, back in the day, you only needed, 2,000 square feet for a small Chicago office with a few staff members. But now, we have 18,500 square feet here. Plus, I'm in the middle of an expansion project of over 8,000 square feet. So about every 5 years, it seems like we're taking this next step in space as well, which can be complex and very costly. So it's not just in people and growth, but it's also in cases and in space. I'd say the biggest challenge that I deal with today is happiness. And it's something that we don't talk about much as a profession, but it's making sure we're happy in what we do and content. And this is an issue that not just for me, but for our lawyers and support staff members is keeping everyone happy. And this is a massive challenge as you grow and you get busier and your law firm becomes more successful and the law firm makes more money. And we can touch on that a little bit later, but I would say happiness is the biggest challenge. I find myself to be a psychotherapist sometimes as much as an operator of a law firm. So there's mental health to be considered nowadays and trying to find that work-life balance for our people. So that is always the biggest challenge. In the beginning, I would say it would be case generation. When I was talking about kind of those early days of coming into a plaintiff law firm and kind of having to fly by the seat of your pants and learn how to do all these things, one of the things we did pretty early was develop a website. And nowadays, I mean, if you didn't have a website, you're not in business. But back in those days, only the big firms had websites. And so I remember the first challenge being not being able to sleep at night because now I've been hired at this job. I went from $22,000 a year to $27,000 a year. And boy, I had to really deliver for that kind of money. And so I remember just not sleeping a lot thinking, how am I ever going to generate cases? Because still at that time, the majority of cases were coming in from attorney referrals. They weren't coming in from direct marketing leads. And so that was the biggest challenge. I think the first year we had one case submission from marketing. By the second year, we had 2 or 3, and I think we actually had signed up a case from marketing. So that was really the biggest challenge in the beginning, was just generating enough business to make my position as marketing coordinator relevant so that the boss would be happy with what was being produced. Sure, there's a lot of that goes into just keeping up the brand of the firm. That might not mean it generates business, but for me, it was generating cases. I figured if I could generate cases for the firm, whether that be through the internet or whether that would be through newsletters or direct mail pieces or advertisements, sponsorships, then if I could do that, then I would have longevity. I think the big problem for me, though, years later, and I think especially over the last maybe 5 years, just before COVID and then through COVID, was the biggest challenge has been finding good people. This is something that I spend much of my day doing. Is I'm constantly looking for more employees, improve employees, I'm constantly looking at resumes. I probably look at over 500 resumes a month, even when I don't have a need. And so, if you're going to have growth of lawyers, you have to have growth of secretaries and paralegals and marketing people and IT people. And so that's a constant burden. Now, when I'm up at night, I'm thinking, oh, what happens if Cindy leaves? What happens if Martha leaves? What happens if so-and-so retires? I better get working. And so that's been the biggest challenge. And the quality of potential employee out there has suffered a bit over the years. It's just getting harder to find them. And the really good ones are usually paid quite well and taken good care of. So it's not like they're just dying to come into your law firm. So I'd say finding new employees, building the team, constantly evolving the team today is the biggest challenge that I face.
I'd like to come back to a few of those points. I definitely want to come back to the happiness thing that you mentioned. Staying on the topic of marketing, though, I'm glad that you brought that up. Can you discuss a successful marketing campaign that significantly impacted your firm's growth at some point over the last 20 years? Something that stands out as, that really leveled us up.
Yeah, I think we talk about tipping points here a lot. Like, what were the tipping points that kind of took us from one level to the next level? And I would say that about roughly 15 years ago, I developed a relationship with a vendor who really assisted us with our website and our electronic and digital marketing. And I'm very leery to say there's one specific marketing tactic. I beat my marketing team on the head with this constantly, and that is that you have to approach marketing not from a single tactic, but from 50 tactics or 100 tactics. And so if you're going to look for a specific tactic, yes, I'll give you an example of that. However, the majority of our cases are very, very large and significant cases, record-breaking cases, multiple $1 million, tens of millions of dollars in valued cases many of them, most have come through marketing-based campaigns. And those are mostly optimized campaigns through our primary website. And so I'd say that those would be some of our largest. Now, a very specific example would be we kind of dipped our toe into mass torts a few years ago, and there were these environmental cases in a place called Willowbrooks and a company called Sterigenics. And we really wanted to make the folks that lived around this facility aware of the potential dangers that this facility presented. And so we had a pretty enthusiastic approach to it. And one of the things we did is a Facebook campaign that hyper targeted the folks in that area. And that Facebook campaign, we boosted it on a number of occasions, and we ended up getting one of our primary clients from that campaign, and it led to the largest verdict in Illinois history. And so yes, we were doing town halls, and we were doing newsletter alerts and direct mail, and we were optimizing our website, and we're doing everything you would normally do. But that Facebook boost was the difference maker in bringing in an outstanding client, and then the legal team took over and just absolutely knocked it out of the park. So great team effort.
Yeah, that's really good insight, because I think a lot of the lawyers I speak with, they're always saying like, oh, well, we want to try TikTok, or we want to try this tactic. And to your point, the likelihood of your marketing being effective stems from trying all these different tactics simultaneously, because it's not as simple as, oh, I'm just going to run a Google ad and then people are going to click on it and then they're going to contact me, right? Like, they might click on that ad, but then they might turn to your Google business profile and start reading your reviews. They might go to, they might look up, your testimonials on your website. They might turn to Reddit and read some, testimonials there. It's not this simple, one-touch marketing funnel that people suspect occurs. They're looking at all these different other sources of truth to validate whether or not your attorney is the right fit for them. They might even look at things like Glassdoor, like how are the employees talking about their experience working at the firm, things like that. So
yes, no truer words have been spoken. It's very true. I look at it. I had a meeting on Friday with a lawyer from another law firm, and I do this quite often. Someone's looking for advice or wants to run an idea past me. Have you done this? Has it worked? Has it not worked? And I love sharing that type of information. And this lawyer said, I got $150,000 and I want to really hyper target car accident cases. And I'm thinking about doing X. What do you think? And I just kind of wanted to catch my breath a bit and just say, if you're going to funnel that much money into one idea, yes, you might get a couple cases. It's possible. And you might have a limited amount of success in it. But the quick fix usually doesn't do it. It's a slow, methodical process that takes years to build. And it takes many, many different tactics. And it might be a tactic of sponsoring something. It might be an advertising campaign that it could be direct mail. It could be PPC, LSA ads. It could be organic optimization. It could be, I don't know if I said fundraisers, but, nonprofit work, Google reviews. You have to have your fingers on a dozen different tactics. And oftentimes the tactics are changing. So you have to be really in tune. And in addition to that, how have I forgotten this, is marketing to referral lawyers. This is a really big piece. It opens up a whole nother avenue of business for you. So if your optimization standards and tactics aren't working, well, at least you've got these 3 referral lawyers that trust you and are sending you business. And then when their marketing isn't working and, they're not sending you business, well, at least we have this happening. And social media has been a huge help as well, but not perfect. And so there's always going to be a gimmick or something going on that you want to toss money into. But we try to put a little money in everything. And if your goal is to say, well, I've got $100,000 to put into a car accident PPC campaign, God bless you. However, how many firms really have those types of resources to do that? So you start slow, you build a network, you build relationships, and you slowly but surely build each of these areas. And the more money you make, the more money you reinvest into those different tactics. And when you fail, it doesn't hurt as much because you got 7 other things going on that might lead to a successful case. So it's for me, that's how I approach it, and it's worked. But there might be a lawyer who says, well, I just do television advertising, and that pays the bills, and I make a lot of money doing it. Great. But for most of us, there's smaller, less expensive tactics that can be implemented that can be just as effective as long as you're spreading those resources over a number of different tactics.
I completely agree. To kind of summarize that, it's almost like there's a need for diversification, right? If you're a one-trick pony and you're only getting cases through one medium, you're opening up your firm for risk long-term, right? Because, Google can change overnight. Look at TV viewership over the last decade. That's diminished significantly. So there's a need to kind of figure out different things to generate predictable case volume and qualified lead volume for the firm. And then on top of that, it sounds like, TJ, you and your marketing team have embodied this like test and learn mentality where you're always willing to put some budget towards something new to see if it unlocks further growth. Is that a good synopsis? Yeah.
When you think about calculated risk, it's easy for me to say it because I'm not paying for it. So you have to have a managing equity partner like I do who trusts the process and is willing to invest the money needed to generate business. And if I didn't have that, none of this would have been accomplished, none. And so you need forward-thinking people like I had with Pat Salvi, where he's approaching this many, many years ago thinking, I've got an idea. Wouldn't it be great to have an internal marketing person? It's just this full-time and all they're doing is pounding out content and making that initial investment and then watching that initial investment grow to where it is today. So it is risky. it's calculated. And if you surround yourselves with the right people to accomplish the goal, it's going to be it's going to be well worth it.
What does taking calculated risk look like from like a planning and budgeting perspective? Or does that mean you're literally sitting down with the partners beginning of the year, or 3-4 times a year, and setting aside a portion of that budget just for testing purposes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm actually going through that process right now with a mass tort that we've been playing with. We've been investigating it for about 4 months now. And so, sitting down with the equity partner and the managing partner of the office, and making a recommendation of how much money will be needed for the advertising campaign and the marketing team, and then also how much money will be needed and how much time will be needed for the intake team. And so, yes, simple answer without getting into a ton of detail is for anything major like that, this is, again, not knee jerk. This is 4 or 5 months of investigating, 3 months of interviewing vendor teams that, will earn our business and we'll be able to have a good, trusting relationship with, and then testing it for 30 days on a small scale to see if there's something really here. Because if you hear about a mass tort's a whole nother area we're just kind of learning about. It's too late. 30 other firms have already started, promoting it, working to generate these cases. So I think if you're going to be really successful, you've got to be kind of the leader in it. And so I fortunately have management here and ownership that, takes those ideas and allows us to nurture them and test them. And if it doesn't work, the calculated risk was, we spent X amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars digging in and seeing. And so we have to calculate that could be a loss. Now, that wouldn't have been that way 20 years ago when we didn't have those resources, but now there's a little bit more wiggle room in the budgets to have those types of take those next steps in the marketing strategy.
Right. And I think with having that mentality, there's always a silver lining, even if the campaign doesn't go as planned, right? You're still gaining insight from making that investment, and you're only making the firm smarter the next time you plan to do something like that, right?
Yeah, and I remember years ago, this was like a long time ago, right? Kind of when I first started back in with the firm in this kind of heightened role. I remember someone in leadership saying to me, "We're not in this to lose money," fists a pounding, And so my role ultimately is to be profitable, and I say this a lot, and the people around here probably roll their eyes, but I think one of the things that I want the entire team to understand is most of us will never have our own law firm, right? Especially us non-lawyers. We won't ever have our name on a marquee. It won't say Salvi, Schostok, Pritchard, and Saye ever. Well, I suppose I went to law school at my age, which is a possibility, I suppose. But it won't be. And for most of the lawyers here, it won't be. And for all the staff, it won't be. But the mentality has to be that everyone that walks down this hallway feels like their name is on the door, right? I mean, you have to kind of feel like you're part ownership here. And I think that's one of the things, whether it's marketing, operations, people walk around here feeling as if they're part of the marquee. They're part owners in the firm. And so, I think at the end of the day, that's a very important aspect that all firms should be looking to try to accomplish.
Perfect segue, because you mentioned before the happiness challenge, and big part of your role today is making sure that everyone's happy and rowing in the right direction. What things have you done over the years to foster a positive and productive work environment within the firm?
I think the biggest piece to accomplish that would be open and honest communication. And I think the one area of all areas that I might say I'm most successful at is that relationship building with the employees. I'm their advocate. And from the very beginning, I still do every interview to this day. That's how much pride I take in it. Not just so that I see the quality of the people that are coming through the door, But also, I think it means something when a secretary meets with the COO, not some HR coordinator. And when I have those meetings, and they take up a lot of time, but it takes a lot of work to find great people. But I actually have it posted here too. I talk about something that I've identified as, I call it the process of decline, and I'll read it to you quickly. So when we talk about fostering a positive work environment, we have to identify early on what could create a negative work environment. So when we spot the warning signs, I need to be careful, or I need to do X in order to solve this problem. But I found that the process of decline starts with being offended. It's just being offended. Now that's everyone, right? I'll probably be offended at some point today. Maybe you will as well. So offending isn't horrible, but it's the first step. And this is feeling disrespected or underappreciated. Usually it's compensation based. Then if it gets to step 2, if you don't solve step 1, it gets to step 2, I call it resentment phase. And this is someone now who's a little disgruntled, bitter. They feel like they're the victim of some kind. Again, it's not catastrophic. I think we can all say that we feel this way. But again, we're identifying the negative traits and we're trying to solve them early on. So if someone comes in my office and they sit here and we start talking, I might say, it sounds like you're a little resentful. What can we do to solve that? And they're aware of this from the first interview that this conversation might take place. And then when they're talking amongst themselves, that might become aware of it as well. That's stage 3. This is where it gets dangerous. This is the need to share. This is the recruitment stage, as I like to call it. When we get here, it gets very difficult to control positive energy in a law firm. It's not catastrophic, but it's pretty close. So you're not necessarily dealing with one person who's disgruntled and resentful and offended. Now you're dealing with 3, 4, 5. And this can create a real big problem for a law firm, especially if it's lawyers. But there is this hidden danger that this is also can occur with your support staff. And then there's retribution. This is where these people now want to punish you and sabotage the operation. And finally, destruction, where they end up leaving the organization one way or another, whether it's through termination or just through quitting. And so one of the things I like to do in creating the positive work environment, going back to your question, is very early on identify what makes for a negative work environment, and then trying to solve those different negativities as they approach. I actually put 2 therapy chairs in my office, and I have an open door policy. So if anyone wants to talk about a problem, they can come talk to me. And I find that when they stop talking to you, this is where the true problem begins. So sometimes people, so-and-so is complaining about this, or I'm okay with a little complaining. Sometimes that will do the trick, and it allows me an opportunity to try to solve the problem. So I think open, honest communication is really the key. Getting to know your staff is also important. And I think a good sense of humor creates a real, productive and positive work environment. This is stressful work here. You can't be afraid to, crack a little appropriate joke or have something in common with someone that makes them smile. But these interpersonal relationships I find are so important. Knowing I don't have to be friends with my employees, but I do want to be friendly with them. I want to know the names of their spouses, their children. I want to know what they do for fun outside of work. These little connections will help me when I'm doing their review, when they are considering another job offer. These are the little differentiators that if you're not doing that as a COO, then you should take the time each day to do it. And you need to have a talking point or a personal connection of some kind with each of the people that you manage. I would say, in addition to that sense of humor, having a friendly but fair work environment where not one person thinks someone else is being treated better than them, or that they're being treated worse than someone else. And then create a really beautiful work environment. I mean, I spent a lot of time. I spent 2 years finding this space, and I spent probably another year building it out. And then I included the employees in the build-out process so that they had a voice in it. It also protects me later if they want to complain about something. I could say, well, aren't you the one that said we should have glass office doors? And so, but including people in that process is a really important piece. So work environment, very important. And finally, the financial reward is so important that you're not just paying people to be here, but you're paying them very generously to be here. And it hurts. It hurts a little bit sometimes to overpay a bit, but you're better off doing that than underpaying. So often when I interview people, I find out that they haven't had a yearly review. They haven't been told that they're great at what they do. And again, that's how you're going to get to the first stage of the process of decline. Or they haven't received a pay increase in 3 or 4 years or a noteworthy bonus. So anytime we have a big success on a case, everyone on that team, under almost every circumstance, is paid what I would say a very generous bonus. And Pat Sr. and Pat Jr., both the equity managing partner and the managing partner, are huge fans and proponents of that policy. And so if you work hard and the firm does well, you're likely going to do very well as well. So those are a few of the things that I try to do to produce a positive work environment and foster a productive work team.
That answered a lot of great insight there. I want to go to the opposite end of that question now and talk about client satisfaction. So can you share a little bit about how your firm approaches client satisfaction and retention?
Yeah, well, for us, retention, it might be different than if you're a defense firm where you have like when I was at Michael Best, we had a big grocery client that, they're just billing them every month, multiple practice areas, cross-marketing to other practice areas. But for us, it's very rare for us to lose a client. I can't, once a client's been signed up, I can probably count on one hand how many times that's happened in my professional career. And I think that's primarily because our clients do a lot of homework before they hire us. We're talking about catastrophic birth injury cases. These typically aren't people that they see a TikTok and they're like, oh, call the first person I see. They do a lot of homework and they're making an informed decision on these high quality, high end cases that are complex, especially again in the medical field. And so it would be very rare to lose a client. And I think it's because of our expertise level. I think it's because of the outstanding people that work on these files. And I think there's just very clear communication between the client and the lawyer. Expectations are reasonable. We never overpromise. And we keep the client in tune to what potentially their case could be worth. And hopefully will far exceed whatever the case value will be. So I think that's one of the reasons that we've been very fortunate not to lose clients. And this is I just had this conversation with one of our interns the other day. This is a tough business. I don't know if there is a tougher business than a plaintiff's law firm. You're battling thousands of law firms and tens of thousands of lawyers just to get the call, just to get the intake. And then if you're lucky enough to get to the intake, then your intake team has to be able to secure and understand whether, and very quickly, get this potential case to a lawyer. Then the lawyer has to fight against another maybe 5-10 lawyers to get the case signed up. And that's quite a process. Explaining the contract, getting the client to trust you, the dog and pony show. Then you get the case signed up. And then, the client can leave for any reason and at any time. So there's no way you can force a client to stay with you. And then if the client does stay with you, talk about retention, and thankfully that's not been a problem for us, then you've got to have a successful result, right? I mean, if the case doesn't settle, then you got to try it. And we're a trial law firm, not a settlement law firm. And all the things that can go wrong every step of the litigation process. You could find an expert that doesn't agree with you. Your client could pass away, leave. You could lose the case. If you even win it, you could be appealed for the next 3 years. The company that you've sued might file bankruptcy. This is a really, really, really tough business. And so I think ultimately how you keep the client satisfied is clear communication so they understand all the stages of the litigation process and you far exceed their expectations. And I think if you can do that, ultimately you might get a good Google review. We don't live and die by them. It's nice to have them. And it's one of those 50 things we were talking about earlier that you should focus some attention on. But even some of our largest verdicts we've ever gotten, we haven't gotten a Google review because we don't force that onto our clients. We're just glad that they got some level of justice for their case. And but I hope that's not too long-winded, but that's, I think, a good way that I approach retention.
Are there specific systems or protocols in place to ensure that client communication doesn't drop off? One common, question or problem I've seen is sometimes lawyers don't know how often to communicate with their clients because there can be long stretches of time where nothing's really happening with the case, right? So have you found like a sweet spot? Like, is it quarterly, biannually? Is it monthly? What do those communication touch points look like typically?
Sure. Anytime anything happens with a case, either the lawyer or the paralegal will contact the client. And then, obviously if there's a long dry spell, there's communication. I don't micromanage that process. I trust in the lawyers. And as long as there haven't been any problems of a client complaining of a long delay in, hearing or learning about their case, then of course I would address it, but just hasn't happened. So I trust that the lawyers are able to figure that out and are putting the client first and communicating with the client. My role is a little bit more in other areas, such as helping to make sure the attorney referral lawyers are being, because they can get forgotten about pretty quickly, especially if you have a number of solid attorney referral sources. If you're a referring lawyer, you have lots of choices. I mean, in Chicago, there's probably 10 really good med mal firms that you could send your cases to. And we here realize that not responding to an intake, not rejecting the case in a timely fashion, not explaining why we're rejecting the case, not communicating during the process of the case. Those are all quick ways, or losing a case, right? They're all easy ways to piss off a attorney referral where they just stop sending you business and they don't have to explain why. You just stop seeing the cases. So one of the things I do is I keep track of these referral relationships, who's working on the cases. And I have a tickler in my calendar that every 30 days, as a reminder to our lawyers to reach out to those referral sources, not just to give them an update, but also thank them for the cases they've sent. And now they might not call every 30 days, but I'm sending them a reminder every 30 days to do that.
Do you have someone at the firm that just focuses on referrals, like a referral coordinator?
You're talking to him right now. Yeah, and I think this is one of the areas I need to improve on is I watch and read through every after hour phone call message. Every intake that's done, every email that's sent, I'm looking at it. I'm watching everything that's happening from a business perspective. And that's not necessarily healthy. And but the reason I do it is because back in the early days of marketing, when we would only get a few cases in, there wasn't the urgency from some of the lawyers back in the day. And so they didn't understand how much work it took to bring in a lead, and that you only have minutes to call that lead, depending on how the lead came in. If it's a direct phone call versus social media versus organic optimization from your website, depending about when you're ranking in all these different areas, you kind of know how much time you have. And so I know. And it also helps me understand what areas of marketing, by tracking all that stuff and watching all that stuff, what areas of marketing that we're failing in or not doing as well as we should be, or might want to put a little bit more money into it. So if, for instance, I notice over the course of 30 days, we're not getting a lot of failure to diagnose cancer cases, med mal cases, I might kind of re-examine how we're approaching those cases through our optimization standards. So it's the curse, though, is it can eat into your personal and private life. And it can become all consumed with it. So I would say over the next few years, one of the things I plan to do is bringing someone in like that, or assigning that role to someone that can take some of that load off. Because as we've gotten bigger, it's just getting harder and harder to track all these things.
TJ, we're coming towards the end of the podcast. I got one more question for you. What advice would you give to other COOs or executives in the legal industry looking to enhance their firm's marketing and operational efficiency?
I think that the most important advice I can provide, I'll kind of break this down to three little pieces. First is take time each day to think. We're so driven by tasks. I have a list of 10 things I got to do, before noon. And we kind of get lost in not thinking about a problem or thinking about potential solution. And so I think you need to take a few minutes each day just to kind of sit, close the door, turn off the computer, and just think about a problem. Think about what could happen. Think about what should happen. How can I become better at what I do? What am I missing? And what would happen if I had to hire 2 more lawyers tomorrow? What would happen if... So I'm kind of processing this in my head, or a marketing campaign that might not be working. Or maybe it's something personal outside of the office that is kind of bothering me. So take time to think, slow down, close the door, and meditate a bit. Again, don't need an hour to do it, but maybe 2 or 3 minutes to slow yourself down. Number 2, I would say there aren't any quick fixes. This is a methodical, long process. This law firm, has been developing its practice for decades. And my role is basically 20 years to get to where we are today. And like I started this off with, we're just starting this process. So there aren't quick fixes. It's a slow and methodical problem. Things need to be thought out. You need to be highly selective with the people you hire and patient with the people you hire. So no quick fixes on hiring. And if you lose somebody, just don't go hire. You're better off without someone. Take your time, but plan ahead. If you're thinking that someone might leave, then you're already thinking 3 months in advance about how to replace that person. So when they do leave, you already have your plan B in place. Finally, I call it catcher's mentality. And I was a catcher when I was in high school and college. And I had a coach that used to say, TJ, catcher's mentality. And basically what that is you have to be prepared for the ball to be in the dirt. You have to be prepared for assuming that there's going to be a foul tip off your shoulder or off your head. So you're assuming something bad is going to happen every time there's a pitch. And why do you assume that? So you're ready for it. And then if the ball comes straight down the plate and there's no problems, great. No problem at all. But if it doesn't, you're kind of ready for it. And there's kind of a relief when it comes down the plate straight. So I kind of have a catcher's mentality in the way I approach the firm and life in general. And I think everyone that manages a firm well has to have that mentality. And if you do, I think you'll be a little bit better prepared and less surprised when something happens that might not necessarily been expected. Anyway, I hope that helps.
It does, TJ. This was awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your knowledge. How can our listeners learn more about Salvi, Schostok, and Pritchard?
Very easy. We just redesigned our website and we put a wonderful new video up that introduces the firm to our clients at www.salvilaw.com. All one word. My information's on that, but more importantly, our lawyer's information is on that. So if there's ever a plaintiff's med mal case in Illinois that you might have available for review, please think of us, and we'd be more than happy to have that type of relationship with you and be honored to have it. So that's where you can find us.
TJ, thank you again. To our listeners, thank you for tuning into this episode of the Pareto Legal Podcast. We'll see you next time for another episode.